A drunk tourist in a Superman costume tried to humiliate a royal guardsman, thinking he could get away with it. But the guardsman's reaction shocked the crowd, turning the tourist's spectacle into a powerful lesson in honor and dignity. Against the backdrop of the majestic British palace, where every brick seemed to hold the centuries of history, a guardsman named Harry, a man of 30, stood at his post. His posture was like that of a statue, his face a steel mask. Dark-haired and slightly tanned, Harry was the embodiment of discipline. His scarlet uniform was impeccably pressed, the massive bearskin cap sat perfectly atop his head, and his gaze was unyieldingly stern. The crowd gathered near the gates buzzed with energy, tourists laughing, snapping photos, shouting in various languages. Harry, like his fellow guardsmen, remained motionless, impervious to the commotion. But as is often the case, there was always one person determined to be the center of attention. Among the throng, one man stood out. Jason, a quintessential American in his early 40s, sporting a beer belly, a sunburned face, and a brazen demeanor. His face, adorned with a cocky smirk, was framed by short dark hair. The pièce de résistance, however, was his outfit, a Superman costume. In his hand gleamed an aluminum can of beer. Yes, right there on the street, in front of the palace, amidst the crowd. He was a walking meme, that one tourist who thinks the world revolves around him. "Look at these serious guys. What, you can't move?" Jason bellowed, pointing at the guards. His voice cut through the din of the crowd. "What if I put on a show?" The crowd chuckled, and someone pulled out a phone, sensing that this might be content. Jason, pleased with the attention, began moving toward Harry with slow, exaggerated steps, as though preparing to embody a superhero role. "Hey, buddy, smile," he shouted, leaning in closer than protocol allowed. "I'm a superhero here to entertain you." The irony of the situation was palpable. The absurdity hung in the air like static electricity, making even the atmosphere seem to buzz. Who would have thought that this Superman believed his drunken antics could disrupt a centuries-old tradition? Harry, as expected, remained still, but his composure seemed to further egg Jason on. "Come on, pal. I went to all this effort for you," Jason pressed, winking theatrically. The crowd laughed, some whispered their disapproval, but Jason couldn't have cared less. In his mind, he was the star, and Harry was merely a prop for his show. Jason, puffing out his heroic chest, stepped closer, crossing the thin white line that symbolized a no-go boundary. In his mind, this act was a bold move, a feat of daring. After all, he was a tourist. He'd paid for his tickets, drunk his beer, donned his Superman suit. Wasn't that enough to make the world revolve around him? "So, how about a photo of Superman with a British hero?" he shouted, spreading his arms wide. The crowd responded with laughter, and a wave of smartphones pointed in his direction. Emboldened by the attention, Jason pressed on. He took a step closer to Harry, almost invading his space. His drunken face shone with a cocky grin, and his eyes sparkled with the reckless thrill of someone crossing all boundaries of decency. "Let's make this epic," Jason declared, pretending to deliberate. "Maybe we should hug a British hero and an American one." Harry didn't flinch. His gaze remained as cold as a museum statue, but a subtle tension began to build beneath the surface. This was the line, a very fine line. Jason, oblivious to the unyielding discipline of the guardsman, took yet another step closer. Laughing loudly, he reached out, aiming for the towering bearskin cap. His movements were so clumsy and uncoordinated that the scene was simultaneously comedic and infuriating. "Ha! What if I just hold your hat for a second? What's the price for that?" Jason yelled, tossing a handful of coins at Harry's feet. The sharp clink of metal on stone rang out, a jarring sound that felt like a protest against Jason's audacity. The crowd froze for a moment, then erupted in a mix of reactions, Some laughed nervously while others muttered in indignation. A woman with a stony expression called out, "He's a royal guardsman. Show some respect for tradition." But Jason was too wrapped up in his performance to notice. He leaned in closer to Harry, as if trying to peer into his eyes beneath the shadow of the cap. "Come on, buddy, give us a smile. You're here for us, right?" Jason said with a theatrical wink. Harry remained silent. But if you looked closely at his face, you could see the faintest flicker of icy patience beneath his motionless exterior. Every word Jason spoke, every coin thrown on the ground, was like a slap in the face to the traditions this post represented. Seriously, who does this? It was beyond the pale. Even the most uninhibited tourist would have sensed that something about this was profoundly wrong. But not Jason. In his eyes, Harry was just another feature of the attraction, no different from a carousel or a clown at a fair. And Harry simply held his ground. A man whose strength lay not in his physicality but in his restraint. But how much longer could that restraint last? As Jason once again reached for the bearskin cap, Harry finally did something no one anticipated. With a swift, deliberate step forward, his imposing figure came to life, and his low, commanding voice cut through the air. "Step back, behind the line." The crowd gasped. The moment was so unexpected that even the usual noise of London seemed to pause for a beat. Jason froze, his hand suspended in midair like that of a child caught red-handed. For a fleeting second, confusion flashed across his drunken eyes. But of course Jason couldn't let himself lose so easily. In his mind, he was Superman, and Harry was just another background actor in his grand performance. He took a step back, but only to loudly exclaim, "Oh, so you can talk. Show us what else you've got, buddy." The crowd murmured among themselves. Some found Jason amusing, but more and more people began to look on with disapproval. Why push it this far? Why turn someone who represented British heritage into the butt of a joke? And then, a child's cry pierced the air. The crowd fell silent and turned their heads. A little boy, no older than 5, stood at the barrier, tears streaming down his face. His beloved stuffed bear, a well-worn but clearly cherished toy, lay just beyond the white line. No one dared to retrieve it. Crossing the boundary seemed unthinkable. Harry straightened slowly, his cold, inscrutable gaze settling on the boy. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he stepped forward. The crowd collectively held its breath. Every movement he made felt ceremonial, precise, deliberate, measured. Harry picked up the toy and carefully handed it back to the boy. "Here's your friend," he said calmly, looking the child in the eyes. The boy sniffled, clutching the bear tightly, and then, unexpectedly, he quietly but earnestly said, "Thank you, sir." The crowd erupted in applause. The energy was electric. Even those who had sided with Jason now looked at Harry with newfound respect. In that moment, Harry was no longer just a figure in a red uniform. He was a man, steadfast, proud, and compassionate. Jason, standing off to the side, suddenly looked less like a hero and more like a clown. Seeing that the crowd's attention had shifted to Harry, Jason couldn't stand being upstaged. In his mind, if the show had started, he had to finish it with a bang. Staggering backward, he raised his arms and loudly declared, "And now Superman saves London." He began to dance in what he must have thought was a heroic fashion. In reality, it was a chaotic blend of clumsy swordplay and drunken flailing. The crowd, many of whom had already turned away, still chuckled, but this time the laughter was mocking, not admiring. Jason, oblivious, continued his performance. He waved his arms, stumbled through a few awkward steps, and even attempted to fly by leaping into the air. If you'd seen it live, you might have thought, is he seriously still going? But his act was short-lived. A tall police officer approached him, his expression calm but firm. Standing beside Jason, he spoke in a measured, authoritative tone. "Please step back behind the line." Jason, who seconds earlier had been saving the world in his mind, stopped mid-dance. His face first showed confusion, then awkwardness, as he tried to joke his way out. "Oh, you want a picture with Superman too, officer?" The officer didn't even crack a smile. He repeated, his voice steady, "Step behind the line. Now." The crowd roared with applause, their laughter directed squarely at Jason. He was no longer a hero. He was a drunk tourist in a ridiculous costume being escorted away. It was the final act of a poorly executed comedy sketch, and for Jason, a complete and public defeat. Meanwhile, Harry, as though nothing had happened, adjusted his bearskin cap. His movements were as precise and composed as they had been at the start of his shift. He returned to his position, standing tall and staring straight ahead. For him, the incident was over. As the square began to clear, the little boy with the stuffed bear approached Harry. His eyes shone with the admiration. Stopping a few steps away, he whispered softly, "Thank you, mister." Harry gave a slight nod. His face remained stoic, but inside, he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. Even amidst chaos, there was room for honor and kindness. The next day, videos of Jason dancing in his Superman suit went viral, garnering thousands of comments. But the real hero of the day was Harry. Though he would likely never know it, his actions reminded people everywhere that dignity, tradition, and quiet compassion are what truly make a hero.